Hi there, and welcome to Be a Global Citizen, the podcast that explores the concept of global citizenship through the lens of value-creating education. My name is Scott Bauer, and I'm a Soka researcher and educator. I hope you find the discussions, stories, and insights on this podcast to be valuable and inspiring as we strive to become global citizens who are committed to living a contributive life. Enjoy the conversation.
Hi everyone, I'm Xian and I'm from Malaysia. I'm currently doing my master's in the Harvard Graduate School of Education, like Scott. And yeah, we met recently in our China track just about 2 months ago.
Yeah, that was such a fun trek, wasn't it?
It was quite an eye-opening one, I would say.
Definitely. And, I'm sure
Yeah.
we're going to really get into that more. But
Mm,
I think it's incredible how we were able to connect through the fact that we're both doing our masters at Harvard. And
mm,
then this incredible opportunity to really learn more about what's happening in China. What does the education landscape look like? I know for
mm.
myself, it was my first time. Was it your first time too in China?
No, it's not. I think it was like the second time. I think the first time I went to China was like 20 years ago, so a lot had changed. So yeah, it was interesting to just go back and see like how um big of a difference it is right now. And also yeah, coming from like an educator's lens, visiting like different schools and learning like what's happening on the ground.
Right. And I think
Yeah.
the word change is something that is very applicable, not just to China's development and where it
Yeah, that's
is
true.
now, but also in your own journey, right? As an educator,
Mm.
I'm very curious to learn more about what got you into the field of education. What are some of
Oh,
your greater interests and ultimately like
mm.
what brought you back to school, right? I know that you had been
Right.
working full time in Malaysia, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Where you're originally from. So maybe if you can share about, like take us far back to
Okay.
like when you were growing up. It would be great to hear some milestones in terms of like what brought you into the world of education and like what's just maybe share.
Okay. I think lucky for me, I knew that I was interested in education since I was 12, actually. So what happened when I was 12 was that I was placed next to this boy who wasn't exactly my best friend. I wasn't really like fond of him, but my teacher pretty much like assigned me to sit next to him to help him with his schoolwork. So we were all actually preparing for a national exam in Malaysia back then, and he wasn't doing as well. So my job was really like to kind of like be like a peer mentor kind of thing. And I think over the months when, I was mentoring him, helping him with his work, our relationship also got better. And fortunately and thankfully, he actually did perform pretty well in the national exam. And I think that that was one of the greatest like sense of achievement I felt when I was a kid. And it was really that moment that reminded me like, oh wow, like this is how teaching feels like. And I would like to continue doing something like that. So yeah, I think ever since then, I've always like kind of like delved into any teaching related opportunities as well. When I took my gap year to apply to the States for college, I also worked in a Montessori preschool, and that was when I knew that I was interested in early childhood education. Went to college here over in the United States for about 4 years, and then I went back home to Malaysia after graduating. And I think during that time, while I knew that I was interested in education, I wanted to try something different as well because I was, a young, fresh grad, with a lot of like energy, passion. And while I did not intern, sorry, like, I did like a short stint, back in Malaysia, working in a primary school for about 3 months when I was job searching. I really enjoyed the work itself, but the environment wasn't what I was looking for. Um, a lot of the teachers there were basically teachers who taught me when I was in primary school. Oh, I went back to my alma mater. Sorry for some context. I went back to my primary school itself to teach. So a lot of the teachers were of like an older generation, and I just knew that at that time I wanted to work with like young people, and that environment wasn't giving me that. So I did like a complete like 180 turn and went into corporate instead. So I was working in a big four firm in Malaysia doing risk consulting. It was meant to be just a year. I gave myself 1 year, just to, try things out and see how things are like. I ended up staying for 7, mainly because I think when I first went in, I think perhaps going back into where I went to college, I went to a liberal arts college, and I think the mindset that a lot of us had was very like anti-capitalism, right? A bit social justice sort of thing. So when I went to corporate, I had that mindset like, oh, all corporates are evil. A lot of backstabbing happens in the culture. But turns out it was not really like that at all. I mean, of course, I think at every workplace you go to, there will be like politics to navigate. But all in all, I had a really good experience working in the firm that I was at. So I set some goals for myself, like hitting manager, helping my team win an international award for our line of work, and also to train associates to become senior associates. So I think it took me about like 5 years to hit all my goals. And after hitting my goals, I asked myself like, okay, what's next then? For me at that time, the next promotion or like the next goal to set would be senior manager. But I never really saw myself being in that role. So that's when I knew like, okay, it was time to go back into education. So the plunge to quit my job and try to figure out like, which area of education I wanted to go into. I started exploring early childhood education again. I reconnected with the principal of this particular preschool whom I met before I started my consulting work. And I was teaching part-time in the preschool itself. Had a lot of fun, learned about a completely different early childhood education approach, which is called the Reggio Emilia approach. And yeah, it reminded me again, like, wow, I really have a heart for early childhood education. But at that point, I was also asking myself, like, maybe there's more out there within the education industry that I would be interested in. So while looking for different jobs, I realized that a lot of the roles itself really required a master's program, like a master's requirement, which I did not have. So that's when I also started looking into applying for the master's program while job searching. So my last stint before coming to Huxley was working in a higher ed institution back in Malaysia, doing social-emotional learning and also project-based learning. I was gonna see how things would pan out while being navigating that space. And when I found out that I got into Huxley, I pretty much just worked there for 4 or 5 months, and then came over to Cambridge. That was a long one.
No, that was perfect. Thank you so much.
But yeah,
And
no
I think, wow, like your story, it sounds like there are some like really decisive moments, right, where you decided to pivot and then to pivot back. I mean, I think oftentimes we have this understanding, we like, you find something and then maybe look what else is out there, and you take that jump into the next thing. And oftentimes, like, you realize, like maybe that's not what you wanted to do, or maybe it's everything you wanted to do. But like the fact that you then pivoted back to early childhood education is, I mean, I think it's beautiful. I think it definitely speaks to some like deeper, like the heart that you have for the relationships you create with your students, and this desire to really give back to younger generations. But yeah, I mean, we'll get into like all of that. I kind of wanted to go back to like the starting point with you tutoring this 12-year-old.
Yeah, we were both 12.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
mean, like I think that's such like a wonderful story because of how simple it is, right? You said you didn't really like this kid, and you were kind of
Yeah.
forced to help him out, but like maybe could you like bring yourself back to that time period?
Mm,
Like
mm,
think about like what were you like actually doing to help this boy? Like what was like
mm.
what were some of like the tactics that you used? Was he resistant, or like like maybe like share a little bit more about how indeed your relationship got better through that?
Okay. Okay, I think I should also provide some context, like why I was not a fan.
Yeah,
So I think
like
we were classmates when we were in grade 4. So we were 10, in Malaysia. And basically he I think he was just I think we were just being kids, right? But this boy just could not stop annoying me for a long time. So he would actually okay, this is gonna sound really funny, but like he tried proposing to me for a month. So like whenever I'd be like in class, he would actually like kneel down and ask me in like Mandarin to marry him. And I was just like, oh my God, I gotta stop this. Yeah. So it was going on for a long time, which was why I was really annoyed. And then when I found out that I was like in the same class with him like 2 years later, I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. But we did not start off the year being seated next to each other. It was only like 6 months into it. Then my teacher like switches up and I'm like, oh my God, are you serious? Why do I have to sit next to this kid out of everyone else in the class? But I guess, in terms of like what tactics that we did, so I think one thing, that we did, which is a very, traditional Malaysian Chinese primary school, kind of culture is that, so we would have homework every day, right? And we actually have to jot down, right, what, homework do we have for the day. And we had to make sure that we tick it off, once we're done. And then, the next day, we would have to then show to our teachers that like we completed that our assignment. So that's what I did. I basically wrote down like his homework checklist for the day every day for him. And every morning when he comes to school, I would then check that he all of them off. So that's one. I think at the same time while checking off the list, I would also ask him questions like, oh, did you manage to figure out like the question that you had issues with the other day? So I think just like a lot of like following up with him, and I think like being open to giving him the support that he needed. And of course, because we were kids, so then eventually, I guess that kind of helped us like bond. And we also have, I guess, I cannot recall on the top of my head, but I'm sure we had like cute, funny friendship moments that kind of like brought us closer as well. But those were the things I remember doing. So like every time he had a question, I would guide him through answering the question as well.
yeah. No, thank you. And that context really does help, and that's so cute as well. And the fact that you still
It's so
remember that,
silly.
a very sticks in your
Yeah.
memory,
Yeah, it's
something about
crazy.
that guy. I think
Yeah.
it does make a lot of sense that you would have this aversion to him because he was kind of bothering you, or kind of
Yeah.
it was maybe overwhelming, right? The ask,
Yeah.
and how
Correct.
absurd that might have been, because you're just like, I'm just trying to like do my school and like talk with
Yeah.
my friends over there, and here you are on your knees like trying to propose. and and then suddenly, right, you find a situation where instead of kind of rejecting any of his
Mm,
like advances, now you have to really
mm.
sit there with him, and you're the one
Yeah.
asking him questions, right? So he's not
Yeah.
asking you the question of will you marry me, but now it's so totally flipped. You're having to ask him questions
I
of
guess
like,
so.
yeah, did you
Yeah.
check off the box? Did you
Yeah.
forget this, or how are you doing with this? And,
Yeah.
and it's kind of seeing him in a different dimension
Yeah.
probably gave you more compassion for what he was struggling with, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think I remember during that time, he had some family issues as well. So I think like he
You might have
was
shared
looking for
you,
connection
right?
um in school that he couldn't find at home. But funnily, just a few months ago, my primary school bestie reached out to me, and said that she's trying to find this guy. Like we have all been trying to find for this guy again on social media, but we couldn't find him till today.
Really?
Because I think that if I could meet him again, I would definitely buy him a drink and tell him that he changed my life.
Oh, that's so
I
sweet.
would.
And
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
think also, like, you did mention that when he like he was making improvement and then he actually performed well on the test,
yeah.
and you felt that to be like your own achievement. I think that really is
Mm,
such like a hallmark of good
yeah.
teachers, and that it's not
Oh,
really about like yeah, they want their students to do well. Yeah, it does reflect
mm,
well on the teacher, but it's more than just like the numbers of like did they pass or did they not,
yeah,
but did they truly
yeah,
improve? And you got to see that in a very intimate kind of way, the back and forth questions and the fact that you were stuck there
yeah.
in a tutoring and mentoring capacity.
Correct. I think like on top of that, right? Like sure, like grades is something that you can measure, but I think like there's something really whatever the word I'm looking for. There's something really precious about things that you cannot measure as well, like the quality of like the friendship that we had over
Mm-hmm.
the months. Yeah. And I think like eventually like the class also just kind of embraced who he was. He was a bit like socially awkward, but also like the class joker at the
Mm.
same time.
Yeah.
We some of us found it like annoying at first, but eventually we found it to be pretty endearing.
Yeah. And then
Yeah,
even now. So I think
yeah.
he
Even
definitely
now,
like left
correct.
a positive imprint on you.
Yeah.
And then
Oh, definitely. He changed my life, man. He changed my life. I would
there
say.
you go.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what I'm like curious though is that like,
Mm.
there was like this kind of drive to want to like, you know, explore early childhood education.
Mm.
You were at a Montessori preschool, and I'm sure
Mm.
that was amazing, and you felt like, wow, this could be really my pathway. But it sounds like you
Mm.
got a little bit disillusioned going back to Malaysia, or maybe not. The word's not disillusion, but maybe it was just kind of, um, uh, a serious question, a reckoning of like, is this the
Yeah.
approach that I want to use? I know there's others that exist out there, but you kept mentioning at the preschool, or like your alma mater, that there
Mm.
was something about like how the teachers were just very kind of set in their ways, right? They were
Mm.
generation. Could you maybe like unpack that a little bit more? Is that what really led you to then say, you know what, I'm going to try something totally different? Or like,
Right.
what was that about?
I think first off is that um at that time I had just graduated from college, and if I were to go into like a Malaysian public school education track, I would have to go into like a teaching college in order to get my qualification. And I wasn't really keen on that idea because I was kind of like done with studying. I just wanted to work. So that's one. And I think second thing was that like I think there were a lot of things that I saw I wanted to change during my 3 month stint back at my alma mater. But I know that there's just a lot of bureaucracy that I had to navigate. And I was so young. And I think that um your experience and your age really matters at a place like that. And I think the ideas I had could potentially be too radical for that environment. And I think for me, it was like, oh, I am fresh grad, and I just really wanted to meet people who were of the same age or like similar age, and just I guess share like the same drive. Not to say that the teachers who were older did not share the same drive, but it's like a different kind of drive. I think for them, they were already looking forward to retirement, but for me, that was not what I was looking for. Yeah, so I think I just wanted to be among like peers who shared like same mindset and also like just like in the same phase of life. Yeah. And where I was in my alma mater didn't have that. It was just really as simple as that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
totally get it.
Mm,
And it actually makes me think
mm,
a little bit about maybe this was like a year and a half ago, because
mm.
in my story, right, I had like went off to Brazil for most of my teaching experience,
Right.
and then
Right.
coming back was quite uh shocking in that like a lot of my experience was not really kind of taken seriously when it came to applying
Mm.
for teaching positions, because I needed to get a credential. I needed a
Yeah.
California state licensure, right?
Correct.
And so I was doing some substitute teaching at some of the schools nearby, including one of them was my alma mater for high school.
Right.
It's like the same thing about like, teachers
Yeah.
that were my teachers, and then hearing the kind of conversations, it just felt very tired, right? You said like they're kind of looking
Mm.
forward to like retirement, and
Yeah.
that speaks to like the school culture, and as a young person, right, you want to be where the action is, and it's
Yeah,
very
pretty
easy
much.
to like kind of be a little bit hesitant to like jump into something that you feel like you might get like kind of I don't know,
Mm.
or like it just everything kind of falls onto you. So so I totally get that. I think for me, like,
Mm.
that I had been teaching for so long before that, I was just kind of seeing it as like a stepping stone.
Yeah.
The desire of like, oh, I want to grow, and like here's
Yeah.
people that aren't really growing I mean,
Yeah.
maybe that's too harsh. I don't know who those
Mm.
teachers are, but again, the perception of like a very young person out of college might be to like just see it in
Yeah.
that light, right?
Yeah. I think for them is that they are growing in like a different rate and different way. Like our goals are different already, right? Like I think for me it's like oh, I want to like drive change, right? I think for them it's like they are past that. They would have had that in that phase in their earlier years. But for them right now the goal is just like, okay, I just want to like get my job done so that I can retire. It's just you still learn things from one another, but I think that wasn't necessarily like the environment that I wanted to be in. Yeah. Yeah. I did meet pretty good teachers though. Like I hung out with like the teachers who taught me, and then we were then like colleagues rather than like a teacher student relationship. So that was pretty cool too.
Yeah, and they're probably saying like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe just use like their first name instead of like Mr. or Mrs. something.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Yeah.
yeah. It's always kind of a
Like
weird moment.
yeah. Correct. No, I think I still refer to them as like Mr. Mrs. come to think
Oh,
of it. We were not on like first name basis.
oh no. Okay.
Yeah.
Not yet. Now
I think like it
maybe.
was hard for me to switch.
Yeah, I can see
No.
that. Okay,
Yeah.
so then you go and decide to just jump into the corporate world. How did you like catch wind
Yeah.
of that? Is that just like a friend was like, yeah, I'm gonna do risk assessment. It's gonna be great, and you were just sure.
Right. So I think at that point of time I have a friend who was into like the corporate investment banking side of things. I think he was always like, into that area of work. And I was always into like education and NGO. And I think he managed to convince me, I would say. I think just knowing I think being in corporate would teach you kind of like how corporate businesses work. And I think it just gives you like a very different perspective and mindset as well. And I think that the idea was that like, okay, I don't have to stay for long, right? Like I just give it a year, try it out. At least I know how it's like. And if I don't like it, I can always quit and go back into education. But if I want to switch later on, so let's say like, if I had started off in education and then want to switch to corporate later on, it's a lot harder. Yeah. So it's more of like give it a year, see how it goes. If you don't like it, then you can quit. But at least you can say that you've tried. So I was like, okay, I think that not a bad idea. I could give it a year. And when I went in there, I realized that yeah, it's really not as bad as I thought. I stayed for 7.
Dun dun. It's very great.
Dun,
For
dun,
7 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's very rational the way that you approached it. I mean, it's cool that like in a way the alma mater, it was like planting seeds that you felt in the moment. Maybe I need to go somewhere else and grow. Then I can come back and then see where it's like kind of at in terms of its the initial interest that you had. And being in the corporate world, I think gives you just new perspective about how organizations are run, I'm
Yeah.
sure also in terms of like the people that you came across, you said that your team
Mm.
won like an international award, which is pretty dope. Or like
Yeah.
maybe also you were being exposed in terms of like scale, like something that you probably couldn't have
Mm.
experienced at a very, very small, I'm imagining it
Correct.
pretty small
Correct.
preschool. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, so like maybe could you speak a little bit about what was yeah, so the culture was what you were hoping, it was more useful, but like
Mm.
in terms of like maybe I don't know, the projects that you were working on, or like what were some
Mm.
of like the asks of you that really got you excited in the work that you were doing?
Right. I think, yeah, well, one of the main reasons why I stayed for a lot longer than I thought was I actually eventually found meaning in the work that I did as well. So I was in the risk consulting area, but specifically in this one function called the business continuity management. So what I essentially was doing was that I would come up with like contingency plans for clients in the event there is an operational disaster. So we're talking about like COVID, a flood, or even like a cyber attack that would bring like the entire system down. Um, so during those events, how would companies respond to that crisis and also recover their businesses? So yeah, that's pretty much what I was doing in a nutshell. And I think I found meaning in that because I felt like I was preparing organizations and people, right? I mean, people at the end of the day are the heart of the organization. So preparing like the organizations and the people on like how to prep for the worst. And if the worst happens, you are at least ready to actually respond to it. And with that, you wouldn't experience that big of an impact. You will still experience an impact, right? If anything happens to you, but then that is being reduced by a lot because you were ready for it. Yeah. So essentially, yeah, that was what I did. I think I really enjoyed getting to know um the different industries. I've worked with like clients from like the financial institution industry to like manufacturing, healthcare, um, government agencies as well. So it was just like a variety of industries, and I think just got to understand like how different companies work. And also from just talking to like the people on the ground, um, learning about how different each work culture is. I think overall that experience kind of like gave me a snippet of like, oh, in the event next time in the future, if I were to run my own business, what are some of the things that I should consider? So I think being able to have that lens really helped me to, I guess, yeah, for future planning, really.
Yeah. Oh, future
Yeah.
planning, like you're going to start a school or something?
Yeah, I mean, in the future, if I do, then I think I will have that lens, and that would, yeah, help me, in planning out and managing in business.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many different stakeholders, different players that
Mm,
operate within the corporate like space
yeah.
and then surrounding, right?
Correct.
It's all interconnected in its own ecosystem. And sometimes, yeah, we need to apply that thinking to schools more,
Yeah,
because so much of it is
actually.
like this sense that they're so contained, and like
Yeah.
parents, they'll take their child and they'll just drop them off and be like, your problem now, and then they'll just leave. And
Yeah.
there's this kind of heightened feeling that like it has to be, everything has to be provided within the school. And I think within the corporate world, as you described it, right, you
Mm,
have so many different people coming to you going to them,
mm,
and ultimately
mm,
looking at the ultimate mission, right, of
mm.
ensuring that they're able to continue in their operations successfully,
Yeah.
knowing that crisis can happen at any moment. And so being
Mm,
proactive and having that kind of plan is really
mm.
important. And I actually think this kind of ties into socio-emotional learning, which we're not quite there yet in
Yeah,
your
yeah.
story, but I think the fact that you found yourself engaged in work that would significantly help mitigate the kind of backlash of like how people are feeling and affected by
Mm,
crisis, is actually really amazing, right? So it's preemptive. It's not like, oh, now they're like in the throes of their own struggles and they need to have interventions. They need to have some kind of way with which they can kind of reframe it and push through it, which maybe is kind of some of the stuff that you're learning already in your program. But like, I think, what you're doing is actually very important. It's equally important.
Yeah, I think that was what really kind of kept me going. And I think like with the line of work, it's one of those things, right? Like you won't be able to see the fruits of your labor unless like something really bad happens to your client, right? Like unlike like a lot of other projects, you get to see like the return of like investment like pretty soon. But for ours, it's like some like shit has to hit the fan. Then only you are able to see like, oh, the meaning. I mean, like the work that you did actually was like important. So didn't happen for a long time until COVID happened. So when COVID took place, then like all the organizations who already had this like business continuity plan in place, they were more ready, right, to actually start their employees to work from home, and respond to like stakeholders appropriately because they already had all those in their plans. So yeah, it was like only during COVID that, not only during COVID, but I think during COVID, that was when like, clients actually came up to us and said like, oh, we're so glad that we actually engaged you, to help us with our plans. And, because of that, when, the government issued a lockdown during COVID, we were able to actually, get everyone to like switch to work from home like immediately, because not a lot of, companies had that kind of like processes and preparation in place. So yeah, that was, I guess, meaningful. But again, like, yeah, gotta like wait for like shit to hit the fan in order to in order to see the fruits of your labor. But I think like, one interesting point that you brought up was also like, how the work that I did actually really helped me in the work that I do now. So I think one of the key things that I also learned back when I was in risk consulting was just, I think, learning about how important structures are. And I think that schools need really good and strong structures in order to operate well. So I think by being involved in all those projects earlier on, I learned a lot about like operational wise, how do you make sure things can flow a certain way in order to achieve your goal. Likewise with people, right? Like how do you make sure that like certain trainings are being done so that people know what they need to do? How do you communicate with all the different stakeholders that you have? So all these skills really, I felt like were very transferable to the education work that I do now as well.
Amazing. No, that's exciting. And, having that long-term vision, and knowing that whether the plan is going to be set in place now or years later, or maybe never used. Well, not never say never, but, way, way in the future.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Well, I hope that they don't ever have to use it. It's kind of like insurance, right?
Exactly.
You buy it, but you hope that you don't ever have to use it. It's pretty much the same.
Yeah. And I think the goal of what we do like in a classroom within the school setting is very similar in terms of like giving them the right tools and setting them up for success. But it's a future that we can't really anticipate. We don't know.
Correct.
And it's going to be perilous. It's going to be challenging, right? And we see that kind of on the horizons. But yeah, I think I kind of want to like backtrack a little bit to when you were taking your gap year, when you were studying over the US. I mean, it's you've had these experiences where you were in Malaysia and then you go to the US and study, and then you come back to Malaysia, and then
now back here again.
Now you're back again, and I'm sure you've done some other travels as well, like during that time to maybe other countries. But I'm just curious about like what was your experience kind of broadening your perspective like beyond just the Malaysian context? Like what was it like for you maybe initially when you went and took the gap year, and then like how has it evolved
Mm,
with each successive, you know, I don't know, period abroad? Like, how would you say that
mm,
your own sense of like identity has been formed? Because the concept of global citizenship, I think a lot
mm,
of it is like it can be greatly impacted by immersing ourselves in other cultures, and I think in this
right.
case for you, that's very much the case. So, but it can be very like it could be a struggle, right, to kind of reconcile
Mm,
between what you're seeing and what you're experiencing, and then what you've kind of been told about or conditioned or
mm,
like from your previous values and your culture. So like what was that like for you maybe like initially?
oh, right. Okay. Oh, sorry. I think I should clarify myself as well. So when I mentioned about my gap year, I was actually doing my gap year in Malaysia. I was not in the States yet.
Okay.
But I think the first time I came to the States was for college. So I
Yes.
think um in terms of the different perspectives, I think definitely like a lot of culture shock. Especially coming from Malaysia, from like like the little things like English spelling, right? Because Malaysians use British English, so I could like change the way I spell things or like the way I label certain things as well. So for example, like we don't call it trash can, we call it rubbish bin, right? Or like instead of elevator, we call it a
Or
lift, for example.
little.
So like so those are like the smaller like things that like oh I had to like switch. But I think like the big one of like the okay, that's a small one. To like the more like medium one would be like I think having to speak up in class. I think
Mm.
honestly that's something that I even still struggle with till today. I think back home the public education system um they they focus a lot more on like oh you need to respect your teachers and you cannot question them, right? And then like over here in America, you are always challenged, right? To give a different opinion or like to perhaps give a different perspective opposing to what your classmates mentioned or your professor might even like push back and yeah having to navigate that. I think that's something that was a medium level of a challenge. And then I think to like the bigger um not challenge but like bigger difference would be like I think I was not um exposed to a lot of other issues that were more prominent here in the US but they were not really talked about at home, right? So for example like LGBTQ, abortion. I think like those were the topics that I learned a lot more about and also spoke to people about over here in the US as compared to back home. I think but times have changed. I think like right now people are a lot more open, but back then, when I was still in college, like I don't think people at home were talking much about these issues. Yeah, so I think that itself also gave me like I think different topics and different perspectives. I think being an international student in the US is also kind of exciting. You get to meet like people from like different parts of the world. Um, I think yeah. Maybe it's when I was in college, uh, I learned more about like what like being like a global citizenship is. Because that's when like you meet different people and then you realize like, oh, we might be from different countries, but like we actually share similar cultures, um, similar rituals to a certain extent as well. I think that was also like the time when I learned like, oh, actually like so we just finished like this spring festival, right? And then I think it was only when I attended college I learned like, oh, um, mm, even like the Koreans and the Vietnamese celebrate Spring Festival as well. It was not just the Chinese. But again, I need to set some context, right? Back then, like social media was not a thing. So accessibility to all this information was very limited. Um, so yeah, I think we got to learn a lot more from like, different people, um, from different parts of the country. I think that was pretty exciting. Yeah.
No, that's great. And I appreciate your response to the answer and how
Mm,
structured it was, because we were just talking about structure and you were like, well,
okay.
there's like three levels actually.
Yeah.
There's like the grammatical of how I used English, and then
Yeah.
there was like the dynamics within the classroom with the
Classroom. Yeah.
teacher,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then there's like the larger like macro,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my
societal,
God.
issues.
Hilarious. Yes.
No, it was perfect because you were just talking about that in your own like experience in corporate world, and then you applied
Okay.
it immediately.
Oh my God. I
Yeah,
didn't even notice it, but yeah, thanks for
yeah,
pointing that out.
of course. That's part of my job.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think the opportunity that
Mm,
you had of being an international
mm,
student, it's
mm,
yeah, I find that, like, especially if you're at a place with other international students and the different
yeah.
celebrations going on, it just you know you don't know what you don't know kind of thing.
Yeah. 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 For sure.
And
For
to
sure.
be in a college setting where it should be encouraged to ask those kinds of
Mm,
questions, to have those kinds of wonderings, and
mm,
to know when, like, okay, yeah, I was ignorant about certain things, like the spring
yeah.
festival with other cultures, right? Not everything
Mm,
revolves around what your country
yeah.
designates as like this is our tradition. And I say that
Sure.
as an American, citizen. I'm like, it's not always
Yeah.
about us, even though we
Mm,
really try to make it. And
mm,
and recognizing that yeah, there's such beauty from those traditions, and how
mm,
they're still very similar, right? They still tie back to like very
yeah.
common like themes, but there's it, maybe like some subtle nuances of like how you celebrate it or like how your family
Yeah.
celebrates it, and that's fine as well. So the point of expanding your perspective, and I think having more appreciation for what else is
Mm,
out there is really lovely. And I kind of wanted to then segue this to an opportunity that we recently had going to China,
mm,
because I feel
yeah.
like this was, such an incredible opportunity to bring together people from different parts of the world, right? We,
Mm,
had like representatives, right, from like the US and Malaysia,
yeah.
from Oman, from
Mm,
Lebanon, right?
yeah.
And then from China. So it was just really interesting to have us all kind of come together and just
Mm,
be curious and ask those questions in terms of the different places that we went to, different
mm,
schools, like international schools, universities, and ed tech companies. I just
yeah.
kind of wanted to ask your thoughts about that experience, just briefly. Um,
Mm.
what's like maybe like one big takeaway that you had from that trip?
Well, yeah, a lot of my friends have been asking me that actually.
Mm,
And like my go-to answer was that like, oh, I I really feel for like the students who are in like the public education track, especially. I think that the stress is real. And I think that it really gave me a different perspective of like, I mean, I always knew that high stake exams were not necessarily the way to go. Um, and I think having like the option to enroll into private education has actually changed the game for a lot of the Chinese students. I think because of my upbringing, I kind of saw like private education as this like luxury, right? That is like only for like let's say like the upper class. But this visit itself has really kind of like helped me reframe. So I remember like speaking to one of the students. So she was actually in the public education track up till middle school, and then she enrolled into a like private international school that we visited. And when I was like asking her like what are some of like the differences that you experienced, and she told me like when I was still in public education doing the Zhongkao, I felt like there was only one way to succeed in life. But ever since I'm in this school, I learned that there are actually many other pathways that I can take um to succeed. And I think that really helped me reframe um how I see private education as well. just like, yeah, I think giving options, like good, better options to people who need them. Yeah. So I think that was like one of my biggest takeaways. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I
Mm,
really resonate
mm,
with that because it just,
mm,
begs the question, what does it mean to be successful in life? And when
yeah.
you have only one metric, one pathway afforded,
Mm,
of course, everyone wants to be successful, and yet
mm,
you're telling them, no, only this amount of people, this percentage of
yeah.
people can be successful. These are human beings that we're talking about,
Yeah.
very complex. And so I think the kind of like, you know, struggle inside of not quite getting to that, even though they are doing their best,
Right.
right? It
Yeah.
sends
But the best is like not enough.
It sends the wrong image. I mean, a
Mm,
wrong message, right, to
yeah.
kind of their own development and the kind of
Yeah.
internal voice that they're probably telling themselves when actually
Mm,
they're probably there's nothing wrong with them, right? There's nothing
yeah.
wrong with any of them.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
structure that you were talking about that's so important.
Correct. Correct. I think it's also helpful for me at least to see like how like one of the universities that we visited was trying to stay away, not stay away, but more like when it comes to admission, they don't only use one metric to decide which students to admit. It was a combination of like the Gaokao, like the public examination, together with like other things like extracurricular or like English proficiency, for example. So I think it's a great direction to be heading towards. So I hope that like other schools and other universities would also head towards that way. I think that there is a need for some sort of examination, right, to understand like proficiency, comprehension, but then I don't think that that should be the only metric. So having like a combination, like a holistic one should be the way to go.
Right. Yeah. And so, the trip, I think, served its
Mm,
purpose of broadening our perspective and understanding also just on the
mm,
ground floor, what is really
yeah.
happening, and having
Yeah,
those
correct.
interactions with the students. I know for myself included, like it was
Mm,
very, very powerful, right? Because there were definitely
mm,
scenes of, yeah, looking at the students, they look very tired in some of the public
yeah.
schooling. They're
Actually, what
barely,
was your takeaway?
and my takeaway.
Yeah.
And just finishing the thought too, like, the fact that like it was contrasted, it was such a stark contrast with some of the other students that,
Mm,
really were just kind of like acting like a little bit more carefree, but there was like this kind of like, levity and this excitement and this, different energy,
yeah.
right?
Different
Uh,
energy. That's right.
yeah. So yeah, maybe that's another takeaway too, because like, I I go to the different places, the different schools, and the energy of the
Mm,
place is very important. And
yeah.
it's not just coming from the students, right? Of course, it's the administrators,
Yeah.
teachers. It's the way in which, they just kind of interact and flow in the space.
Mm,
So I know I was just trying to absorb as much as I can. I've
mm,
been to different international schools, and like spoken
right.
with a lot of different colleagues who work at international schools, and
Mm,
it's just, yeah, it was just fascinating to be able to see like some of the schools in China, and
mm,
I don't know, it's just there's definitely certain things that are I would take issue with. Like I remember one
mm.
administrator was very proud of the fact that he had lived in China for like X amount of years and
That's, yeah.
only knew like 4 words in Mandarin, and I was like,
Yeah.
why are you like proud of
Yeah.
that? That's not really that's not something to be proud about. And
Proud of. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Correct.
and part of me, again, with like the global citizenship piece of it is like, you if you're in another culture, you should like learn from that culture. You should learn
Yeah.
together with that culture. You should contribute to that culture. I
Yeah.
think, so much of some of these international schools, it's such a business, and it's tied
Yeah.
to very specific interests, and they serve very, very wealthy clientele. And
Yeah.
then it kind of it takes away from some of the like the spark that really makes
Mm,
education really worthwhile. So
Mm,
that's something, but that is a little bit of a downer. But there were many
mm,
other like wonderful, brilliant moments, and I think actually just even in the interactions that our small group of 10 had
mm,
was very like it filled me with a lot of hope because we all are coming from very different backgrounds, different job experiences,
mm,
and yet we have this shared desire to make some positive impact on the world. So
mm.
yeah, very Hugsy of us all.
Indeed,
Right?
I
Learn to
agree.
change the
Good
world,
to,
right?
yeah,
Um,
correct.
yeah. So to truly believe that and then take action moving forward, I think is very important and very much
Mm,
resonates with at least my conception of being a global citizen.
mm,
Because you have equal stakes in making this world
mm,
better than anyone else, and
mm,
your decision to act on that is so
mm,
important. And in a world that just
mm,
seems more and more just apathetic to what's happening and like the
mm,
destruction, the violence, the misery,
mm,
there has to be a counterpoint to that, and it ultimately
mm.
stems from us. Um,
Yeah, I
but
think like how you are also has a ripple effect on other people,
mm,
right? So, like you mentioned just now how like one of the principals that we met was very proud that, he or she wasn't speaking at many Chinese words or he or she has been in China for so long. I think that really sets a tone, right? To how your school culture really is. And I mean, it's not explicit, but I would think that one way or another, it would actually um affect or more like direct the way you do your work in the school, and will eventually impact the teachers and impact the students and the community as well.
yeah, yeah, and also I will
Um,
say like I don't want to say that
mm,
judgment on that particular principle is not to say he's a
yeah,
man or
yeah, yeah,
bad
yeah.
like a bad principle. I just think,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's not.
we have to be very
It's
like
like,
sensitive to the ripple effects, the example we
mm,
set as leaders, especially
mm,
education leaders, and the potential like
mm,
missed opportunity cost, right? Like
yeah,
you can do so much more within this
mm,
international setting to
mm,
enrich
to make a
everyone
change.
around you and to make a change, right? So,
Mm,
but yeah, we are kind of getting close to the end of our conversation, and I wanted to ask you one final question. I know
okay.
we've been having such a lovely conversation that we lost track of time. Um, but the question is,
Mm,
one that I ask all of my guests. It's
mm,
recommendation. It could either be a book or a movie
right.
or anything. So
Mm,
a TikTok.
mm,
No, yeah. Anything you'd like to
okay.
recommend to our listeners?
Oh, I think the one book that I always go back to, not always, but most of the time I do go back to every now and then, would be Brene Brown. When we talked about this before,
We did.
Brene
Yes.
Brown's, yeah, Daring Greatly. Well, Brene Brown has written a lot of like amazing books. But I think this particular book speaks a lot to me. Essentially what she talks about is the importance of vulnerability. I think vulnerability, like this term, uh has quite a negative connotation. But there's actually, I think the way that she writes about it shows like the positive side of vulnerability and how it's actually a strength to be able to embrace that. I think if we tie it back right to global citizenship, I think the core of it all is that despite our like individual or cultural or geographical differences, we still have a shared humanity. And I think that um in order to have shared humanity, you need to be able to embrace vulnerability to foster like deeper conversations and understanding. So yeah, I think vulnerability is pretty much the core of it all. And I think she does a wonderful job in explaining that concept. And also, I think just in case people think that like, oh, such a woo thing, to um talk about. Well, she is a researcher, a qualitative researcher, and yeah, I think like her books and her ideas are actually rooted in evidence, um, that experiment as well. So I would recommend that.
Great recommendation. Love
Yeah.
Brene Brown. She's
Yeah.
hilarious and she's academic
I know.
and she's badass. So
She is.
all
She
things
is.
good. And I feel like this theme of like
Mm,
vulnerability and bringing it at the very end of our conversation, it actually
mm,
can be this through line of your journey, because I think with deciding to transform a relationship, like a kind of troubled relationship with this 12-year-old,
Aw.
takes vulnerability, right? For you to
Yes.
stick with it. You could have just said no. And
But
then,
can I have a choice though?
I
Maybe
know,
not. I don't
still
know. But thanks. I'll take it.
take it. But like, also, vulnerability in terms of like making
Mm,
these like life decisions and holding
mm,
true to them to see it to its full benefit. And
mm.
staying in your heart, knowing that like this is kind of ultimately what I want to come back to. Knowing that, you've lived abroad in the US and probably found certain things about it very attractive and that you liked, but then still returning back to Malaysia, there's like a certain sense of commitment and wanting to contribute back to
Mm,
your own country. I think is really beautiful. I know you're finishing up your master's over at Harvard, and uh,
mm.
there's going to be a lot of decisions that will be presented before you, and you don't quite
Oh,
know yet where that will be.
yeah.
So I'm not trying to sway that decision, but I feel like by checking in with yourself and really understand
Yeah.
what where you're most needed and where will like
Mm,
bring you the most excitement and like that
yeah.
energy. Ultimately it stems from that like confidence to like kind of go forth, and so much of what Brene Brown preaches is to like really step into that space. So just
Mm.
know that your mission is like unfolding before you, and it's going to be great. And I really appreciate you
Thanks.
taking this
Ah.
time. And I'll give
Oh.
the last word to you.
Mm.
Any send off, any final thoughts, just as we wrap up.
Wow. Any final thought? I think like what you just mentioned, right? Okay, actually I've been thinking about this a lot. Um, so I know that there's always been this saying, right, that like you are at where you're meant to be, right? You're not behind, uh, in any way. I think that, I only kind of like fully embrace this concept this year itself, like, doing my master's. I think a lot of times, I felt like I was behind, but then like actually when I look back, at my career and at my path, I realized that, at every step of the way, like, the challenges and the successes, um, they were meant to happen at that time, at that point of time. And that is the mindset that I've been carrying at least when I'm like navigating this uncertainty moving forward, especially with graduation coming along. I think just knowing that like whatever is meant for me will not pass me by. And that yeah, it will eventually all be okay. I might not know it now, but I know that one day when I look back at this very moment talking to you, it would all make sense. Yeah, I think that's my final word, I guess.